began, he's had over 30 years of experience in mass media on both sides of the monitor. Started his career with Associated Press, joined CNN as one of the founding correspondents of CNN in 1980, has been a senior Washington and senior White House correspondent, has covered stories such as the Iran-Contra affair, Watergate, and has had a long history with ABC and with as a guest anchor in many news stories, news shows, as you've seen in his resume that's been submitted to you. And then Bob switched sides and Fenton is now the media consultant. And he has been hired by government officials, legislators, and CEOs of major companies throughout the world of how to deal with media relations and to get your point across. And one of the reasons we've invited Bob to be a guest speaker today is his power of persuasion discussion. That it doesn't make any difference whether you're a CEO or you're making a presentation to a supervisor, it's how to get your message across. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce Bob Berkowitz.
Thank you, Ed. It's hard for me to imagine how any of you could be a success in business without being a good persuader. Let me correct myself already. You have to be a great persuader. In the business world, you are persuading all the time. In fact, in our lives, we're persuading all the time. If you want to start a business, you've got to get VC people, investors, excited about what you're doing. You have to share your vision. How many of you are going to apply for a job after you get out of UNC? A couple of you out there, right? Well, you're going to have to persuade a potential employer about you. You suddenly become your business. And you have to persuade them that you add something to them. And I'll get to the importance of that in just a moment or two. We're always persuaded. If you have a business, you not only have to get the investors, you have to hire people, persuade them, hey, this is a great place to work. The media, pay attention to us. This is an interesting story. Customers, of course, always need persuasion. At some point, I promise you this, you're going to need to do a presentation of some kind. Somebody, your boss, your business, whatever, you're going to have to present. You'll have a power slide. What the hell is my hair get so bright? This was taken 2 days ago, I swear. In presenting something to somebody, you've got to get their attention and get it fast. You talk about an elevator speech. I live in our building, my wife and I live on the 31st floor on the west side of Manhattan. It takes 1 minute and 10 seconds to get to the ground floor. Nobody stops up to where we are. I work in a building in Midtown Manhattan, and on the 26th floor it takes a little longer. That's what we used to call an elevator pitch. You have that much time to talk about you, talk about your business, talk about whatever you are trying to persuade someone. Again, too long. You have maybe 20, 30, 40 seconds to get their attention. And I promise you, if you don't metaphorically grab them by the lapels and you lose them, good luck trying to get them back. So how do you get them excited? How do you get them to at least pause and say, I need to pay attention? Because, when you lose them, they may look like they're paying attention. They nod their heads. They may even take a few notes. But they start to think about something else. They think about what they're going to have for dinner that night. When their fingers start getting itchy for that little black ball, in the middle of this, or the moral equivalent of whatever smartphone you've got. I work in a lot of conference rooms throughout the country. And, it's typically they have these long tables. And there's somebody at the head of the table droning on. He's got about 16,000 points on each slide. And he's talking. He thinks that we can understand both reading the slide and listening to him. It's not going to happen. when people's attention start wandering until they start, they put this under the table. And they think nobody knows what they're doing. They think they're fooling everybody. And the old people like me, because our eyesight is negative, we're doing like this. So how do you get their attention? My belief is that you need to start out with a bold statement or an audacious question. Something where they have to really say, oh, that's interesting. So let me give you an example. This is a true example. About a year ago, I was coaching entrepreneurial teams at the Stern College of Business at New York University. They have a competition every year where they offer $100,000 in prize money to pure entrepreneurial programs and $100,000 to social entrepreneurial programs. And I get to coach the people that I represent in front of this panel of judges who are investors, venture capitalists. And a team had a wonderful product, terrific product, could literally change the world as we know it. But their presentation stunk. It was terrible. It was boring. It didn't get you thinking about the future. What could be? How is this possible? So I said, let's rethink your approach. So here's what we did. Took out the product. They said, what if there was a small piece of technology, as big as you can see, not too expensive, that could turn dirty water into clean water? So the 840 million people around the world who have no access to potable water suddenly can drink clean water. Imagine how many lives would be saved. Imagine how many doctors, nurses, teachers, lawyers, authors we could have in the world because they lived beyond the age of 3. Now, that took about, 35, 40 seconds. I think that's attention grab. And it also gets to the part of you where you start seeing in your mind, you say, imagine, what if? Words that go to the part of the brain when we start seeing what's possible. What I'm about to tell you is the most important part of this talk. If you remember nothing in our time here together, please remember this. This is really important. It will not only serve you well in terms of your business career, but in your life as well. And that is this. It's not about you. It's always about them. Whether you're applying for a job, whether you're starting a business, whatever it is, it's never about you. It's always about them. Even when you're trying to sell yourself to a future employer after you graduate from Monfort, UNC, you have to talk about you in the context of them, your future employer. Because quite honestly, they really don't care about you. They only care about what you can do for them. So you have to understand what their values are, what they aspire to, what their dreams are, what turns them on, what scares them, what worries them, what keeps them up late at night. It's never about you, it's always about them. To do that, you have to ask really good questions. If you have a chance to talk to the person that's interviewing you, ask them questions about their company. Ask them questions about where they want to go. But for goodness sakes, become encyclopedic in your knowledge of that company before you walk into that interview. Go online, find out everything you can. Form your own questions. Well, I wonder why they don't do this, why they do that. I'll give you 2 examples of people that we all know that were very good at understanding the needs of others, the values of others come first. As you know, Nelson Mandela was locked away in prison for 20 years in Robben Island. And he, at some point, wanted to get better treatment for him and his fellow inmates. So he said, how am I going to communicate with those that control our fate? The people that run the jail. From the prison guards up to the administration. They were all white Afrikaners. And he and his colleagues were all black Africans. So he said, what do I do? How do I get into their head? How do I walk in their shoes? He learned Afrikaans, their language. He studied their history, their culture, their politics, their sports, their music, even learned their poetry. Because he wanted to see life from their point of view. Not his, but their point of view. And he was able to get a tremendous amount of accomplishment and getting great improvements for him and his colleagues. Steve Jobs. You know Steve Jobs? Many years ago, Steve Jobs and Apple were having some problems. They were having some difficulties with the company. And so Jobs wanted to hire a CEO, someone who had more experience in business than he did. So he found a guy, John Scully, who he liked very much. Now at the time, Scully was the CEO of PepsiCo. Obviously they make Pepsi-Cola, Mountain Dew, a few other soft drinks like that. And he was trying to convince Scully to join him at Apple and run the company. And Scully was resisting. He loved Apple. He thought Apple was a great company. He thought Jobs was a genius, and we sort of all agree with that. But for him to leave PepsiCo, it would have meant that he had to move from New York to California. He didn't want to do that. It also meant that he'd have to cut in pay. It would uproot his family. They were huge stumbling blocks. But Jobs wouldn't give up that easily. Jobs wanted to give it one more shot. And so he went up to Scully's apartment on the west side of Manhattan, overlooking Central Park. And he said to him, Steve, he said, John, rather, Steve said, which would you rather do the rest of your life? Make sugar water or a product that's going to change the world? Well, he understood what Scully's values were. Scully had an innate desire, a hunger to change the world. And he accepted Jobs' offer. Even though he was going to get a cut in pay, it was going to be terribly inconvenient for him and his family, and a big lifestyle change. He understood. Jobs understood. It was not about him. He had to understand where life was for John Scully, what he valued, what was important to him. For him, the important thing was he wanted a shot to change the world. And he felt he could do that with a Mac and not with a can of Coke or Pepsi. Very important. It's not about you, it's always about them. I believe as much as you can, tell stories to make your point. Facts and figures are important, don't get me wrong. But stories stick to the brain. They build an emotional connection between you and the person you're trying to convince. When you tell a story about what you're about, your experience, your life, when you're going out to get a job, that story, it's almost like a screen goes up in the listener's mind, and they see what you're talking about. And they literally consider, oh yeah, I see what he means, I see what she's talking about. Very important story. I told you the story about Mandela. I bet you could see Mandela. Maybe you see him in his cell reading his books and Afrikaans and learning about the history and poetry. Maybe you saw Steve Jobs trying to convince John Scully on the balcony of Scully's apartment overlooking Central Park. You can see the two of them talking. You see the picture. And that's important. But I also believe that emotions are extremely important in persuasion. Don't get me wrong. You've got to know your facts. You can't wing it. You have to, as I said, if you're applying for a job, you have to know that company cold. You have to know everything about that company. You have to understand what the earnings are, what the projections are, what the problems have been in the past, what the vision is in the future. Those are facts and they're extremely important. But I maintain that the most important thing is emotions. People make our decisions based more on emotions than we do on the facts. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. J.P. Morgan once said, he said that people do everything in life for two reasons. The good reason and the real reason. So for example, we all have something in common in this room. We're all wearing clothes, right? What's up with you? Why do we wear clothes? Well, it's still a little chilly outside. It was in the 40s early this morning. Clothes protect us against the elements, keep us warm, protect us from the sun. We have a social contract that says we cover certain parts of our body, we're out in public. Those are the good reasons. They're all fine. They're all true. There's nothing wrong with any of what I just said. They're all just perfect. But we have real reasons. Clothes help us make a statement to the world. I'm powerful, I'm creative, I'm sexy, I'm grungy, I'm artistic. They tell the world something about us. Giorgio Armani is a billionaire today because he understands people, we buy clothes for the real reason. Another example. If you were to drive from here to downtown Greeley, how long would that take in a car? 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever. Okay. So if you had a $75,000 Mercedes and a $85,000 Prius, they get you there at the same time, right? 2 minutes, 3 minutes, right? But they make different statements about us. Mercedes tells you what? Powerful, rich. And the Prius says, I care about the environment. I'm very cool. Not as rich as the guy with the Mercedes, but I'm cooler. So they make statements. Those are the real reasons why we buy cars. Even cars. They're there for a real reason. So, ask good questions. Find out about people. When you find out about people, that's when you can order your words, tailor your pitch, so they really get what you're talking about. So it means something to them. It's not about you, it's about them. You want to have a little fun for a few minutes? A little experiment? Okay. Pick a partner, preferably somebody that you don't know extremely well. You do that for a few minutes? You don't have a partner? I'll be your partner. We'll be your partner. We'll be your partner. Okay? Now, take a minute or two and ask questions of them and find out what their values are. Find out what they really care about in life. Find out what's important to them. And then switch sides. Okay? I'm going to time it. Okay. Who wants to volunteer? What did you find out about your partner? You volunteering. What did you find out about the person you were talking to? Somebody. Not something. Yes, sir.
Rob here is retired 2 years ago, and he picked up a new occupation here at UNC at Monfort School.
Good. So you learned something about where he's at now, what he did before, and maybe what he wants to do in the future as a result of what he's doing here at Monfort. Okay? What did you find out about that gentleman next to you?
About him?
Yeah.
Sorry. Frank's at CU Denver, teaches marketing. And he goes further than that.
And what?
Where do you go much further than that?
Okay.
He teaches marketing.
Okay. What else? Who else? My guess is that you learned something, that it's not only listening to what they said, but it's listening between the lines. You listen to, you sometimes get a sense of what's really important to them, what they're concerned about. Right? Listening with a third ear, watching their body language, and you get an idea of what's really going on there. Let me tell you a story about listening. My boss stops by my office. We have a strategic communication firm in New York. We do a lot of PR, we do a lot of helping people, individuals, politicians explain themselves and what they want. All the politicians clothing, all the types of companies that's getting more customers or trying to get investors. So Bob Billenstein, my boss, comes to me and says, I want you to come on a sales call with me. I said, Great. And so we're down in his limousine. We got a limousine item. I take a Soho. So we're going downtown to Soho, and he says, this client, would-be client, is a women's clothing designer, successful, but not as successful as he should be, but fairly successful. Okay, so we go to his studio, and we sit down, exchange pleasantries, and he's sitting across from Bob and myself. And suddenly he folds his arms, sticks out his chin, and says, you know, I've hired and fired 6 firms like yours. What makes you guys think you're so different? And I think to myself, well, this isn't going to go so well. I am not happy the way this is starting. So, Dylan Schneider gets very zen-like. And he says, well, I'll be happy to answer that question, but let me find out something about you. It's not about him, it's about you. When did you first find out that you wanted to be a clothing designer? And he said that he was a young boy in South Philadelphia, working class neighborhood, and he'd see the way women dressed, and he thought to himself, he could see that they could be better. He could see different designs, different kinds of clothes that would complement who they were, what they were about, what their lifestyle was. And he just had that mind for it. He had that kind of imagination for it. And his father ran the butcher shop in the neighborhood and helped him start a small business, which grew into a fairly successful business. And so Bob said, well, let me tell you a little about us. It's hard to explain exactly what we do, but let me give you an example. After we're done with our meeting here, I'm going to go to the Time Warner Center in New York, where a gentleman is going to pay for my time and ask me what he should do next in life. He and his wife have combined 2 apartments in the Time Warner Center. That's in Midtown Manhattan, and it's probably the most expensive real estate in the world. So if you've combined 2 apartments in the Time Warner Center, you're talking about $20, $30, $40 million worth of real estate. That guy's got a few bucks. And he's buying my boss's time for 2 hours, going to ask him to find out what he should do next in life. And suddenly, this defiant posture that this guy had, puts his arms down at the side, and he starts leaning in. And Bob starts telling me more stories like that, all of which are true, by the way. Our clients are some of the richest, most powerful, interesting people in the world. And more stories about him. More he's leaning, more he's leaning, more he's leaning, more he's listening, attentively, asking good questions. And I swear that Bob pulled out a contract out of his briefcase and put it in front of this guy who signed it, and I know what the figure was. But he didn't. So we're driving back up to our office, and I said, Bob, how did you know that what this gentleman was looking for was another father figure, a second father figure, that could help him go from where he is now to where he wants to be? And Bob said to me, every once in a while, I follow my own advice and shut up and listen. So he was not only listening literally to what this guy was saying, he was listening between the lines. He was seeing his body language. He knew he needed somebody who could guide him to the next step. And that's why he told him stories about very powerful, very affluent people that we deal with. He was in effect saying, come with me. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. Like his father took him from nothing to being a successful small business person, you needed somebody to take you to the next step. Bob intuitively understood. Very important. Let me go back to my point about emotions and the importance they play in our decision making, in our memory, what we remember, why it's a big deal. How many of you remember, raise your hands or not, the night Barack Obama was elected president? You all remember. Do you remember watching him on television or online and seeing him speak at Lincoln Park in Chicago? Remember that? Some of you do? Do you remember how you felt that night? Do you remember what he said that night? Remember anything he said? I can't. I remember how I felt. I remember he said something like, great to be here, hope and change, or something about hope and change. And I also remember that he promised his daughters that he was going to get a dog if they went to the White House. That's the thing I remember. Beyond that, I don't remember anything. I remember how I felt that night. You may too. If you were a Republican, you voted for McCain, maybe you thought, oh my God, this is terrible. I feel awful. Oh, goodness gracious, the country's going to go to hell. If you were Obama supporter, you may think, wow, aren't we cool? We elected an African-American man, President of the United States. Hope and change is around the corner. This is great. You remember the feeling you had, but you don't remember the words. Feelings count more than words. Same thing a few months later. Obama sworn in as President of the United States. He's in front of the Capitol building, Washington, D.C. It's a cold January morning. Raises his right hand, puts his left hand on the Bible, takes the oath of office, gives a speech that will go down in our nation's history. Every president does it. Every 4 years. Inaugural address. Anybody remember what he said that day? A little something? Thank you very much. God bless America. Maybe. I'm just guessing. I don't remember either. I just remember how I felt that day. Feelings count more than the cognitive understanding of the situation. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying that's what's important. When people feel something, that's when they get excited about it. Your job is to get them excited. You have to get them to understand what you're talking about, but you have to get them excited. It's not enough for them to say, okay, I get it. It's not enough. Again, think of your own decisions in life. Were they done totally for rational reasons, or was emotion part of it as well? Maybe much of it. Again, purchasing decisions, where do you live, who do you date, they're emotional reasons. They're not rational reasons. That's really, really important. You've got the idea that I think empathy is a big deal in business communications and in life communications. You're right. I really think it's one of the most important things of any kind of communication we have, even in our personal lives. So imagine a world, if you will. Imagine a world in which we truly understood others. It wasn't just an intellectual exercise, but we really understood where others were coming from. Imagine we understood the feelings of people of the opposite sex, same sex. We understood the feelings of people who were of different nationalities, spoke a different language, maybe even our enemies. Imagine how much better the world would be. Imagine how we could get along so much more if we truly got that and they felt, hey, this person understands where I'm coming from. So I challenge you is that when you go forward, whether it's the remaining of your time here at Monfort or beyond, when you're going out in the world and using the education that you got here, understand it's not about you, it's always about them. Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it. Talk to me. Tell me what you think about persuasion and questions you have for me or the way things work in the world, the way you communicate. Yes, ma'am.
I think one of my biggest things is how to understand what kind of question to ask somebody. So you just meet somebody in an elevator.
Right.
How do you know what kind of question to ask to get them started?
Where are you going? I mean, where the person you're asking is, where are they going? Are you going? I wonder if you're going to the same office that I am. So, by the office that they're going to, they're telling you something about that. I have kind of a strange situation in that regard. We have two offices in the floor of our building where I work. Our office and an outplacement office. So people are always, they're looking for a job. And so it's always kind of awkward. But I've learned to have discussions with them. I've learned to say to them, I said, what kind of work are you in? They tell me, what kind of work are you looking for? What's the market for that now? And they open up. People love to talk about themselves if you only give them an opportunity. They love to feel somebody cares about me. Somebody understands me or wants to understand me. And it will give you tremendous leverage in the world. When you talk to a potential employer, a person who's interviewing you for a job, and you say, here's how I can help you. So when you talk about yourself, again, you talk about it in terms of them and how you can help them. We always talk about ourselves, we do it a lot, so, all right, wonderful, darn, terrific, I miss it. Good. But in their context, not your context. You can talk about yourself, but only how it helps them. Only how it makes them better, richer, smarter, whatever. That's what your job is. And even the elevator, you can talk to them about, before you go. It just opens up a conversation.
What other kinds of conversation I've never seen? We're not all on elevators.
Good. Can I tell you one of my favorite ways of doing that?
Please.
I like to go to, my wife and I will go to parties, and I'll meet somebody and I'll say, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm an accountant. Okay. Do you enjoy being an accountant? There's nothing wrong with being an accountant, by the way. At least accountants get me out of jail, probably. Great accountant. But when I ask that question to people, 99% of them say, no, I don't enjoy what I'm doing. I don't care if they're an accountant, they're a lawyer, they're a doctor, whatever, teacher, they don't enjoy it. I say, oh, okay. So if I could wave a magic wand, and I could say to you, you can do anything you want to do, whether you're qualified for it or not, what would it be? And invariably, it's something reasonable. It's not like they say, well, I want to be a center for the Nuggets. Or I want to be, I want to clean up for the Rockies. It's nothing like that. It's usually, well, I've always wanted to be a playwright. Okay. I'm not saying you should quit your job as a teacher or a lawyer, but you can write plays on the side. You don't spend 24 hours doing all this. It's always something that they could do. They stop themselves. And that starts a conversation. That's their values. That's what they want out of it. That's what excites them. Apparently, being a lawyer is not. Or you could say, what kind of law do you do? Is there another kind of law that you'd like to practice? Well, I've always wanted to be a corporate lawyer, and I do criminal law. Oh, what excites you about corporate law? What interests you about corporate law? Yeah, they start talking about themselves, and they reveal things about themselves that are really important for you. You start forming a world of their view, what their life is like, what they want. And it's really powerful. There's nothing more powerful than that. I wish I could tell you something was more powerful, but there's nothing more powerful than that. Gives you leverage. Yes, sir.
Well, this will kind of turn your technique on you, which you were telling us about.
Yes.
So, if you wouldn't mind, would you tell us which presidential administration you worked for and why?
I didn't work for an administration. I covered administration. Very important distinction. I covered the Reagan administration for CNN. CNN had just started. I started working for CNN 2 months before we went on the air on June 1st, 1980. And I started, they said, you're going to go out and cover the Reagan campaign. So I did. And when Reagan won, I was in a hotel room at the election. I was very early for us. President Carter had conceded early, and it was conceded on East Coast time, so it was pretty early in the evening. On the West Coast, I had done all my stories, I had done all my live shots from the ballroom at the hotel in Los Angeles where we were at the time in Central Plaza. I forget that night. I don't know, I went to bed maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. And I remember getting a call about 7 o'clock, Los Angeles time, 10 o'clock New York time, and it was my boss saying, we want you to move to the White House. A couple of interviews. And I never really wanted to be a White House correspondent. I had enough experience in the White House. I say it's a hard route to go. Because you're spoon-fed news. It's very hard to develop sources that are going to tell you another side of the story. So it wasn't me that I said, wow, great, I got to go to the White House. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I was a White House correspondent. But it's something that I really always dreamed about doing. Anything else going on? Yes, ma'am.
How did you get around being spoon-fed the news to report real news?
Great question. I would go to Capitol Hill. And I would go to Republicans on Capitol Hill. If you go to Democrats, you know what they're going to say. But Republicans on Capitol Hill might have had a frustration with President Reagan or his presidency. And so they would use me as a conduit of sending a message to the president. They would tell me what the problems were. I go to Democrats too. But I used to be a congressional correspondent, a Senate correspondent, before I was a White House correspondent, Associated Press. So I went to that, and they would say, here's the problem with what the president's doing. Well, the president doesn't see this. Well, it's easy for him to say that, but he doesn't understand our state or our district. So you get, that's the way I get a different perspective. Either that or I just made our something. And never let the facts get in the way of the truth. Yeah. Who else? Yes, sir.
What took you from corresponding then to doing basically teaching people how to
Communication more effectively? Well, everything, he asked me how I went from being a reporter to doing what I do today. Everything I've done in my life led me to where I am today. Being a correspondent, you have to say, how can I explain this story so it matters to people, so they care about the story, so it means something to them, so we can see this is why how it's going to affect your life. I mean, I'm supposed to speak this afternoon to some journalism students here at UNC, and one of my chief bugaboos about what's going on in the country today, vis-a-vis journalism, is news illiteracy. People don't know what the hell's going on. And I don't think that's so much the fault of media. Maybe it is in some parts, but we choose not to be informed. But I thought part of my job was to explain, this is why it's important to you in your life. And that's how we started to develop my understanding of it's not about you, it's about them. Just to give you a statistic that drives me crazy. This came out in Newsweek magazine. They did a national survey of adults in our very own United States here. 23% of them did not know who the Vice President of the United States is. A little scary. 70% did not know what the Speaker of the House is. Okay, he just started his job, maybe. All right. He's in the news every day. I always maintain that if you lined up 100 people, what's the biggest mall in Colorado? Northland, is that open still mall outside Denver? I went to DU, so more Denver oriented than I am Northern Colorado. You pick any mall. If you line up 100 adults, Native Americans, American citizens, whatever, I don't care, and you ask them what the capital of Canada is, my fear is that only a handful would know the city of Ottawa. But I could be wrong about that, but I don't think I am. That's my great fear. And so I'm excited about the Yes, sir.
What advice would you give to an individual with a reserved personality to become a more powerful persuader?
Oh, that's great. Because people who have a reserved personality are afraid of talking about themselves. They're a little shy, they're embarrassed. But when you shift the focus from you to the other person, it takes away your reserve feeling, your embarrassment, your anxiety, your discomfort. But that's when you have to be a good listener. Listen to what they're saying. Mentally take notes. And afterwards, then you can write down some things. So suddenly, it's not about you, it's about them. And you don't have to be so deep. You can be asking the questions. And I love it. We're so flattered that somebody's interested. Because most of us go through life saying, nobody cares about me. Nobody understands me. Well, you do. You will. That would be a tremendous amount of power in that. Good question. Yes, sir.
What type of nonverbal things should you cue into when you're asking someone questions or just listening to them?
Well, if I were to ask, you can ask someone, not you, but ask somebody, what do you want to do? And suddenly their eyes light up and they start talking excitedly about something, about what they really want to do. That's the cue. If they don't look so excited about it, then I'm saying, well, somebody expects them to do that. I've known people, maybe you have too, who are in that business because they're there to please their clients, and they really don't want to do it. And they say, well, I guess I want to be a lawyer. Well, they really don't want to do it. I guess I want to run my dad's business. Or, hey, I got this idea for a business. It's a neat piece of technology, and they're excited about it. See them lighting up, see their body language, see their hands, and their energy start to move. And that's how you start seeing what really is interesting, what's really turning on. Good for dating also, by the way. Another important piece of persuasion. You guys, how you get girls to go out with you? I bet you. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the importance of storytelling.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that. However, I feel like it's a skill that you need to actually harness. So what's the best way to go about honing that skill?
I'm going to guess that you were like me. Did your mom and dad read your stories when you were a kid? I did. And you love those stories, right? You could imagine it, even if you weren't looking at the pictures as well. But you could imagine what your parents are saying to you when they read that story. It's just how you start. You tell stories all the time. You tell stories to your friends about what you did at school that day, or about the date, or about what you did outside at night, the movie you saw. You're always telling stories. Just tell it from your perspective. And watch their eyes. They start like looking at they're imagining. Like, as I say, there's a screen that goes up. Builds an emotion connection between you and the person listening to you. The Bible is lives. It's a book full of series of stories. Stories that are designed to help us live a better life. Stories are all around us. And I guess, monitor yourself. When you think about your conversations that you have between now and a week from now. How many stories do you tell your friends, your parents, family, whatever, about what you do, what you did, what you want to do? They're all about stories. And just make them interesting. Don't be dull. You've got to be interesting to people. But just, start creating a story. Maybe there was a turning point in your life where you said, I want to be in the business world. You're one of those guys that pick stocks, right? I met you downstairs. What got you excited about stocks? There must have been a moment where you said, wow, this is really interesting. Stocks go up, they go down, but why? I wanted to know why they go. What's the driving force that makes a stock go up? I heard something the other day on television. I didn't understand. I'm sure you did. I'm sure you're more sophisticated than I am. They said oil prices went down $9 today. The stock market went down. I said, wait a minute. If oil is cheaper, that's a driving force in every aspect of our economy, the stock market should go up. I didn't understand that, but I bet you do. And there must have been a time in your life where you said, this is interesting stuff. And what excites, what turns you on about stocks? Where do you see the market going? You're full of stories about yourself and that relationship. Anybody else? Well, good. I have a bibliography. These are books about business that meant a lot to me, that I really like. They're not the dry management books, which I'm sure are wonderful. But my eyes glaze over. But they're books that I think are about the real world when we get into the business world. It's about how you create relationships in the business world. I'm a firm believer in that. The relationships that you create in business are so important. You do nothing but create good relationships and do very well in business. You have a chance to do that. So Lynn has, if you send your email address to Lynn, he'll make sure that I get, he has a copy of the bibliography and you'll get it. And I hope it's interesting. If you find it interesting, if you don't find it interesting, you have questions about it, I'm not that hard to get a hold of. Just Google me. You'll see how it goes. Thank you again for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. I'd like to, on behalf of the Monfort Executive Professor Program, present to Bob just a little plaque, level with base for that, recognize him as the Monfort Executive Professor Speaker. We are going to have a reception downstairs. There's beef nachos and drinks downstairs. Student lounge immediately following. And at 1:25, Bob is coming back to address the students in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication on the topic of who's news. Talking about the ethics of the in journalism.
Wait a minute, there's ethics in journalism? I didn't know this.
And the impact of the internet on some of the traditional news sources, which certainly welcome you if you're interested to come back and hear that discussion. Again, Bob has been really kind to give us his time today on that subject as well. Bob is going to be down in the lounge. Certainly welcome people to come and talk and come on down for lunch and have an opportunity to meet with Bob. This concludes the Executive Customer Speaker Series for this year, and we'll announce again at when we have the lineup for next year, probably at the beginning of classes. So check your emails or Facebook page for that. We will, as Bob indicated, I have his biography, the bibliography, and I will, I'm at lynn.korowski at UNCO. But we'll also put that onto the Facebook page as well, so you can click on that, and we'll get you a link to the bibliography. Thank you all for coming. Certainly welcome to join us downstairs.